Revenants were once far more common. Thankfully, one will rarely come across the vengeful dead anymore. That is not to say, however, that they are not out there. A revenant is created when a person has an unjust death, and is filled with hatred and the desire for revenge at the moment of its demise. Such deaths still occur, and so revenants still pour forth from the angry wounds of this world. The most upsetting thing about a revenant is they are almost impossible to terminate permanently. A revenant will regenerate from almost any damage it sustains. If there is even a sliver of it left, it'll regrow like a clipping from a briar. If you were to somehow completely dissolve the corpse in a highly corrosive acid, for example, it would simply infest another corpse. Soon the new body would look indistinguishable from its old body. The revenant will usually stop only when the object of its vengeful rage is destroyed. It is also important to note that the energy does not have to inhabit a corpse. I have read about instances where the spirit took over a toy doll, and another where it possessed a statue. One might ask, why try to stop them? After all, they seek to kill those that unjustly killed them. The targets of a revenant are often as loathsome as the revenant itself. The answer is this. Revenge is not a pure and honorable objective. It is corrupted at the moment of its creation by this tainted desire. It will kill anyone that stands between it and its target. It may even make targets of innocents that surround the guilty party. If the villain that they seek to kill also killed the revenant's children, the revenant may seek to kill the villain's children for revenge despite the fact that those children are innocent. The target might not even be guilty. All that matters is that the spirit felt the target was guilty and wanted revenge. If that desire for vengeance is powerful enough, then it will come back as a revenant. That is when I am called in. When innocents are being cut down by this creature, I have to step up and stop them. I don't use the word innocence easily. I've seen enough of the world to know that innocence is rare and fleeting, but that is a debate for another journal entry. There is only one way to stop a revenant before it has completed its task, and that is to trap it and seal it away. This is not a foolproof plan. A revenant will always escape eventually. The universe itself seems to aid in their endeavor to escape their prison. If you are lucky, you will seal it up long enough for the object of its vengeance to die of old age, at which point the revenant will cease to exist as its goal has been removed.
Death is the sound of distant thunder at a picnic. W. H. Auden.
It was in October of 1991 that I was called to the town of Coalfield in East Tennessee. I was asked to investigate several mysterious and brutal deaths. I was also begged by one James Welby to please come and save him from the devil himself, as he put it. I was told nothing else of the case beforehand, which made it feel almost like a test. I always did enjoy a challenge. I arrived at my temporary lodgings, located in the nearby town of Wartburg, at approximately 6 o'clock in the morning. I checked into my accommodations and was pleased to see that my assistant Marianne had forwarded all of my equipment and luggage ahead. It was all waiting for me when I arrived at my room. I made a note to remind myself to pick up a Christmas present for Marianne soon, and then unpacked my things.
Success depends upon previous preparation, and without such preparation, there is sure to be failure. Confucius.
A note on supernatural preparation. When making travel plans, it is best to check the weather report. Similarly, when investigating the supernatural, I find it best to consult my tarot cards. Marianne made sure to send my pagan/occult bag, so I decided to make use of my tarot cards. I find a simple 3-card spread can give me a heads up on many possible issues. The first card was the Fool, not too surprising. The first card often represents me, and my deck often refers to me as a fool, probably because I seek out such supernatural evil. Second card was the Devil. I felt this card was referring to someone involved that was surrounded by negative energy and was very materialistic. The third and final card was the Tower. At that point I got it. Things were going to be bad. Of course they usually were when I took a job. Still, this looked worse than normal. I grabbed all of the items I would require and began to head out to meet my 2 contacts concerning this event. The first was aforementioned James Welby, who had the disposition of a jellyfish based on our previous phone conversation. The second was a 40-something-year-old woman by the name of Sissy that occasionally worked with my organization on jobs from this general area. Her expertise with southern folklore was invaluable, and her talents as a witch were even more so.
Fair is foul and foul is fair. Hover through the fog and filthy air. Macbeth, Act 1, Scene 1.
A note on witches. Witches are as varied and eclectic as a group as I've ever known. When I have heard someone say, "The witch is coming," I have been overjoyed in one occasion and terrified in another. Witches are often a bit eccentric due to their lack of social interactions, as most keep to their own counsel. One should be thankful, though often suspicious, of their aid, and terrified of their anger. Beyond this I cannot say. I do not know from whence their powers come, nor do I understand the nature of their weaving. They are an enigma that I have yet to solve. I do not know why, with their great powers, they do not rule the world, or why they are rarely wealthy. My only guess thus far is that such things do not interest them. I had worked with Sissy on one prior occasion. She seemed very agreeable, if a bit distrustful of others. She was also quite lovely, though she did her best to downplay her delicate features. Her late mentor, Mama Tubes, as she was called, also worked with our organization in the past, but she was far more intimidating. If Sissy could be likened to a spring storm, as I believe she can, then Mama Tubes was a winter tempest. I mourned her loss when I was informed of her passing, but I was ashamedly grateful that I would not have to stand in her presence again. The woman's indomitable gaze chilled me to my heart.
There's no wonder that truth is stranger than fiction. Fiction has to make sense. Mark Twain.
A bit on myself. I suppose it is only prudent to introduce myself. A little about the author section. My name is Warren Easton Davenport Jr. I come from a long line of cultists that worshipped an evil, oceanic demon of fortune and power. Isn't that strange, you might ask? And you would be right to do so. That tidbit probably requires a bit of explanation. My family, the Davenports, was a very rich and powerful family in New England. In fact, one of the founding members of the aforementioned cult was a Davenport. I grew up blissfully unaware of our family's secret heritage, but I was being groomed all the while. I was sent to the best schools and received the best tutelages as a child. Upon entering my college years, I was inducted into the same fraternity that my father had belonged to. I cared little for fraternities. I preferred the quiet solitude of study. At the end of my first year, I was told the great secret of the cult, and invited to their annual ritual. I believed this to be more silly fraternity prattle, and just nodded along, all the while contemplating just how childish these people could be. The frat game is getting boring. So we're going to play the cult game now? I thought to myself with a chuckle. While I was right about their childish mentality, I discovered I was woefully wrong about it being a game. The party was held on a private beach by the sea. A great bonfire was made. I was told that there would be a guest of honor at the party, and I was to treat him with great respect, fill his wooden wine glass if I noticed it empty, and otherwise leave him be. I was told that I would know him instantly because he would spend the entire night at the side of the fraternity's leader. This night would be the first time I became aware of the supernatural. I won't go into many details, mostly because I am ashamed of my actions that evening. Whatever power was in play during that party inhabited me, and I was swept along. I will say that the honored guest was sacrificed that night, and I did nothing to stop it. I even applauded the event with rapturous joy. When I came to my senses the next morning, my life changed. I had just discovered the secret legacy of my family in all its putrid glory. We were monsters. We were even worse than the nightmarish thing I saw emerge from the depths of the sea that night. It had an excuse. It never had a soul. I stayed with the fraternity for a few more months just to pore over their so-called sacred texts which were now made available to me. I was a full member of the true organization now, so why shouldn't they trust me? Plus, the ritual had done something to us. We were irresistibly charming, it seemed, and incredibly lucky. Success was our gift from that thing, and so I used it to successfully learn every secret the cult knew. Then I left. I left everything. I left college, my family, and my life. I had saved up plenty of my money before my departure. I was lucky that my family was loaded, and since I'd earned a reputation with my father as having a solid fiscal mind, he didn't bat an eye when I had asked him for $100,000 for an investment that looked prosperous. I used that money to live off of the radar for months. I scoured the libraries, the internet in its infancy, and the groups that I could get to for info on real supernatural occurrences. Unbeknownst to me, I was being watched closely. I thought I had been so smart. But it's hard to remain obscure in the veiled world. Everything is hidden in here. It's like we are all hiding behind the same curtain, nudging each other over for more room. I was approached in my hotel room by a couple of gentlemen. That's when I discovered the company, and that's when my new life truly began.
Two things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity. And I'm not sure about the universe. Albert Einstein.
Sissy and I met with James Welby today and discovered two things. First, James Welby was far from an innocent. He is a slumlord, with little care for anyone but himself. He barely seemed fazed by his wife's recent brutal murder, always returning us to the question of how we would protect him. He didn't seem that worried about his son's safety either, now that I think about it. Still, this gave us two clues. The spirit could possibly belong to one of his horribly mistreated old tenants, and that spirit probably lost at least their spouse in the process too. Second, Sissy would have left immediately if the man's 4-year-old son Troy wasn't also in danger. On no less than 8 occasions this afternoon, I felt the air around me grow cold as Sissy shot James Welby hateful glances over something repugnant that James had uttered. If this Revenant had just been going for Mr. Welby, Sissy would have gladly left him to his horrible fate. I can't say I blame her. I felt the need for a shower after being in his presence. James Welby is an incredibly stupid man with a cold heart and a barbed tongue. The only reason that he could still be alive is because the Revenant must wish to punish him first. This is another reason why we worry for the man's son. I will be spending the rest of my day looking through records of his past tenants while Sissy does whatever it is that she does. I'm hoping that we will be able to narrow it down to a solid suspect with the clues we gathered today. We could have an answer by sundown if we are lucky. Oh, and the wife was brutally choked to death with a rope. It was pulled so tight that the poor woman was almost decapitated. So I will look for past married female tenants that hung themselves or in some way died of strangulation.
In 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. Robert Frost.
It took a few hours, but I lucked out and found a likely suspect. Patrick Sieber and his family had been evicted from his apartment in the winter. Checking the books, I was unable to figure out why they had been evicted. He had paid his rent on time, every month, and there were no other notes that hinted at a reason. Him, his wife Gail, and his young daughter Michelle had to live in their family vehicle while they searched for a new place to live. Michelle got sick, probably from the cold nights. She was admitted to the Oak Ridge Hospital with bronchitis and died within 2 hours of being admitted. Gail Sieber hung herself 24 hours later in a gas station bathroom near the hospital. Police ruled it a suicide due to a suicide note that was left by the victim. In the note, Gail apologized to her daughter and husband. She apparently blamed herself for her daughter's death. Patrick's body was found a week later on a local hiking trail in the woods. Cause of death listed as starvation and exposure. It was clear that Patrick blamed James Welby for the loss of his family based on notes retrieved from his abandoned vehicle. The deaths were viewed as tragic, but no charges were ever brought against James Welby. Sissy and I both realized now that if Patrick's daughter died, then James Welby's son was definitely in danger. We are heading to their home now.
The most merciful thing in the world is the inability of the human mind to correlate all of its contents. H.P. Lovecraft.
The boy is alive. He was injured, but he will live. I don't know how we did it. We arrived at the house and heard yelling inside. We rushed in, fearing the worst. As we opened the door, James Welby came bursting past us, screaming and running up his driveway. Sissy and I continued on to the boy's room. There we found that his window had been shattered, and standing there before us was the lumbering, undead corpse of Patrick Sieber. In his left arm was the 4-year-old, whose feet were kicking as if trying in vain to find the ground again. The Juggernaut's meaty hand was covering Troy's mouth and nose, and his kicks were getting weaker. I ran at them to grab the boy, but Patrick's right arm came from behind him wielding a large sliver of broken glass, which was immediately embedded into my shoulder. I crumpled to the floor from the force and the pain. The glass had shattered right at the exit wound, and I could not get at it to pull it out. I know you're not supposed to pull things like that out, but in the moment all I could register was that there was a foreign object stuck in my body, and I could feel its sharp edges continuing to cut through my meat every time I moved in the slightest. Then I felt a strong fist grab me by the skin of my back, like he was picking up a cat by its scruff. He raised me from the ground and threw me out the broken second-story window. I felt pain and dizziness consume me as I hit the cold, rocky ground outside. I felt the glass in my shoulder break into smaller pieces from the impact, and I knew that I had just broken a few bones and almost assuredly had a concussion. I began to pick myself up as my head began to spin and my body protested in agony. I heard Troy scream and Sissy yelling something that I couldn't make out. The scream worried me, but then I realized that if the boy screamed, then Sissy had somehow stopped his slow suffocation. Then I heard a horrible thud beside me. I looked over and immediately panicked. That strong motherfucker was laying just a few inches away from me. My body found new energy as I scrambled away from the creature. I came to the side of the house and put my back against the aluminum siding, turning back to watch the thing as I continued to back away from it. Patrick was pulling a broken broomstick from his eye socket. That's how Sissy got him to release the boy and how she shoved him out of the window, all in one thrust. It immediately looked over at me as my second wind was giving out. I knew as I watched him get up that he was about to walk over to me and finish me. I did the only thing my mind could think of. I am such a nerd. I tried to explain the situation to him logically. I must have been mad. I told him that killing the boy wasn't revenge. It wouldn't even hurt James. He had already run off and left his son behind. The only way to hurt James Welby was to kill the only person he really loved, himself. I felt rain start to fall as the Revenant stepped right up to me. I stopped talking and just lowered my shaking head and closed my eyes. This was going to be it. He'd crush my head or snap my neck, and that was going to be the end of me. But time passed. The rain continued to fall and nothing else happened. Then I felt hands shaking me. I looked up screaming, only to see Sissy's worried eyes as she looked me over. Patrick was gone. The kid and I were rushed to the hospital. Troy had a sprained ankle from when he was dropped to the floor, but aside from that and some bruising, he was going to be fine. I, on the other hand, was a mess. I had a broken wrist, a broken leg, a hairline fracture in my right foot, and a concussion. That's not even including the surgery they had to do on my shoulder. They had to remove several pieces of glass, do some reparative work, and stitch everything back up. The doctors didn't know if there would be any permanent damage. I'm writing this from my hospital bed a week after the events I described above. James Welby's body was located this morning. He was found gagged and lashed to a tree naked in the woods. He looked starved and pecked up by the crows in the area. The forensic people said the crow bites were all post-mortem, though, and didn't contribute at all to his demise. They found one thing that didn't seem to make sense to them, though. He appeared to have also suffered the effects of winter exposure, but it was autumn. I knew what had really happened, of course, but I couldn't tell them. As far as they knew, it was a psychopath that did all this damage. Cleaning up the mess afterwards is always the worst part. especially with the mess that a Revenant leaves behind. Still, we were lucky. There must have been just enough left of Patrick in there to get through to him, but I don't plan on trying that method of dealing with a Revenant a second time. Sissy came by to check on me one last time and say her goodbyes. I hope to work with her again in the future. She handled this situation a lot better than I did. I suppose it would be trickier to panic a witch. There's no denying that she saved that kid's life, though, and got my broken ass to the hospital. That's as good as partners get. I'll just be sending these notes on to Marianne tomorrow to make a copy to submit as my official report. Not sure if there's anything to really learn from this particular case, but you never know. Maybe somewhere in these observations is a secret I don't even see yet. I'll be starting my next case in another week. Hopefully it won't be as rough as this one. I could do with a nice easy haunting or cursed item removal after this.
From here to there, and there to here, funny things are everywhere. Dr. Seuss.